Hello, everyone. This is Tom Brew from Fastball on Fan Nation, and welcome to Volume 8 of our Payoff Pitch Podcast. It's Monday morning, May 19th, and we've got the whole crew gathered together today. And for a rarity, we've got two of you in the same town at the same time. Brady Farkas and Jack Ankony are with us, and Brady, who covers the Seattle Mariners, is fortunate enough to be in Chicago this week for a Mariners-White Sox series. And Jack, obviously you're back in Chicago too after a weekend with the White Sox Cubs, and you get the White Sox. So, we've worked together here for going on a couple of years now, but you guys finally get to meet each other face to face this weekend. So that should be a whole heck of a lot of fun. So enjoy that, guys, and you'll get to talk a lot of baseball tonight face to face. But we get to talk a lot of baseball right now, which is good. So welcome to the show, guys.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, excited for this series this week. White Sox and Mariners. Been a couple teams, in opposite directions, but I think it should be an entertaining series for us to cover together.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. Well, certainly, there's been a lot going on this weekend. It was a rivalry weekend, and the MLB, which has done this in the past, kind of did it all on steroids. This weekend with just about every potential rivalry series they could come up with happening. The obvious ones in New York with Yankees, Mets, and White Sox, Cubs, Chicago, Angels, Dodgers. The state stuff with in Ohio and Missouri and all that down the line. It was a fun and entertaining weekend. We had 7 teams that had some sweeps, and Mariners, Angels, Phillies, Nationals, Cubs, Reds, Giants, all with sweeps this weekend. Impressive beating the rivalries like that, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed a little bit more of the higher end stakes with it all, but let's kind of jump in first with some of those teams that did sweep. And Jack, let's just start with you. You were at Wrigley Field all weekend, White Sox, Cubs, and I guess it's no surprise that the Cubs swept, but I was certainly very impressed with how the Cubs played in all 3 games. I mean, they just did everything right 3 days in a row and had 3 basic blowout victories.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have a series like this where you have a first place team like the Cubs and a last place team like the White Sox, you're not as much looking for just can the Cubs skate by, but how dominant can they be, and can they put it all together and play clean baseball in a lot of different ways? And I really thought they did. They outscored the White Sox 26-8 across the 3 series. They got good starting pitching all weekend, which I think has been something we've been monitoring now that they don't have Shota Imanaga and Justin Steele for at least a little bit longer. But guys like Matthew Boyd, Colin Ray stepped up. The big difference I thought was, the White Sox really did not handle the elements well. It was a super windy weekend. All 3 games, winds up in the 15 to 25 miles an hour range. White Sox dropped probably 4 or 5 fly balls just because of that. The Cubs played much cleaner baseball. Pete Crow Armstrong was incredible. I wrote about him last night. So really a series where, you expect the Cubs to win, but the fact that they can handle business and really do it without much panic, I think, was a really good sign for them, especially with the injuries they've had.
Yep, absolutely. And when we deal with series like that, well, I used to mention, Jack, with the first place Cubs, last place White Sox, you almost hate to see any of those games slip away, because it's like you feel like, I know everybody was sort of taking that last year with the White Sox because they were just so bad and wound up leading, setting a record for losses in a season that anytime the team didn't sweep, they were like, oh man, we let one get away. And and Brady, I think that too, just from watching all of baseball. It's like winning a series 2-1 sometimes isn't enough. A team like the Cubs that goes in and just pounds somebody, it definitely makes a statement, doesn't it?
Makes a statement, but see, the Cubs also, I think, they put themselves in a where they've been, right? Like, you don't have to sweep those series when you keep doing everything well that leads up to it. I have 2 rules in baseball, right? Win at home and beat who you're supposed to beat. If you do that over the course of 162, you're going to be pretty darn good. Cubs did that over the weekend, and that's why they're pretty darn good.
Yep, exactly. And then another team that swept that you monitor closely too, Brady, you covered the Mariners for us as well. They swept San Diego Padres, which is last week when we did our Padres, our power rankings, I had the Padres as my favorite team in Major League Baseball right now. And for the Mariners to go in there and sweep the Padres, with, very good team. That was certainly a great weekend. And much like the Cubs, I mean, the Mariners kind of did everything right all weekend too, it looked like.
It was improbable, it was unlikely, and it was necessary. Mariners coming off a 1-5 homestand, played really, really lousy baseball against the Blue Jays and the Yankees. Couldn't hit, couldn't pitch. They had the worst offense and the worst pitching staff in baseball over last week. And so to come out here and win all 3 games against a really good Padres team was really, really nice rebound. And it's something the Mariners have shown all year. It's a bit of grit, a bit of resilience, the ability to come back. I mean, look, they outscored the Padres 15-3 in this series. Starting rotation gave up just 2 runs in the series. Bullpen gave up just 1 run in the series. They hit home runs on Friday and Saturday. They manufactured runs on Sunday. Brian Wu goes 7 really brilliant innings of 1-run ball on Sunday. Dan Wilson, who's been criticized at times for particularly how he handles the bullpen, I thought had maybe his best series of the year. They treated it with a sense of urgency. And now the test is, can you come off that high and now go and play a team that's the worst team in the American League right now, the White Sox, right? We see this all the time. We talk about it in other sports, the classic trap game, the letdown game, the letdown series. Okay, it's going to be bad weather in Chicago this weekend. You're facing a not very good team. They need to come out, I think, and send the same statement we just talked about the Cubs sending. I think the Mariners should and need to win 2 out of 3 in this series before they go to Houston at least. But that's always the challenge, is can you get up and stay up after a really good weekend?
Absolutely. And, because I saw it with my own eyes, I can certainly set the stage for that too, because I was in San Diego 3 weeks ago when the Rays went in there and in the Petco and swept the Padres, outscored them 9-3. Held that Padres lineup to 3 runs in 3 games. And then the Rays turned right around, came home and went 1-5 on a week-long homestand. So it's like, that old analogy of how you're only as good as your next day's pitcher. Sometimes that's very true, but also momentum can be a fickle thing, where you can play well, but then not carry it over. So I think you're exactly right. It's going to be interesting to see how they do coming into that. And, and Jack, I don't think the White Sox are going to do a lot of great things this year, but I think they've certainly been playing better baseball. But it was certainly frustrating watching the White Sox this weekend really just make a whole lot of mistakes. And even with the wind blowing out like it was in Wrigley, it didn't really seem like they did enough offensively either. But it just seemed like a lot of that sloppy play that sort of defined 2024 came back.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And something we've talked about, like with, I've asked Venable, Will Venable, the first-year manager this year, about is it does seem like this year they've played cleaner baseball and they've been much more competitive. Like, even though they got off to a really slow start, I think they had 10 losses in their first 30 or 35 games, 10 one-run losses in that time. So they had been playing competitive baseball. This weekend against the Cubs, I think, was a really a step back in terms of the sloppiness with the defense. Like I mentioned, just dropping bloopers and fly balls because of the wind. In the game on Friday, they had 2 chances to throw runners out at home and didn't execute either play. One of them, I think, was just a really a perfect slide from Michael Busch, but the other one, Matt Tice, just dropped at home. Brooks Baldwin dropped the ball in left field yesterday that kind of spiraled into a couple of runs. So I thought, this weekend was a step back for the White Sox in that respect. That you mentioned, the bats, that's kind of the offense has sort of been, slow all season. They really, I think, thought Luis Robert was turning a little bit of a corner, but, he had 2 hits yesterday, but, on the whole has not had a season they want from a standpoint of him producing in the lineup and maybe even being able to trade him. Sort of the same thing with Andrew Vaughn too. So I think they need those guys to heat up, because Miguel Vargas has actually been, really hitting well over the last month or so. But it's just kind of the lineup as a whole has not.
Sure. Just got to need certainly a team we'll just have to watch all year just to see the highs and the lows. And we know the lows are going to be there, but certainly, we've had some opportunities to see some good stretches for a handful of days with them. So hopefully that will continue. Hey, Brady, I had a question for you in regard, you pay close attention, obviously, to all the teams out west for us with Fastball and SI. Two teams that swept this weekend that kind of surprised me a little bit. Certainly the Los Angeles Angels, when went into Dodger Stadium and swept the Dodgers 3 straight, and they are certainly the stepchild in Los Angeles when it comes to baseball and media attention and all that. But the Angels, who've not really been playing, they got off to a decent start, but have not been playing well for a month or so. Went in there and played 3 great games and beat the Dodgers, and also the Giants. Beat an A's team that's been relatively impressive too. What'd you think of those 2 sweeps?
With regards to the Angels, I think we just chalked that up to that's baseball, Susan. Like, that's it. That's all I can say, because the Angels are not a particularly good team, and the Dodgers are the World Series favorites. So this is one of those things you just chalk up to blind squirrel finds a nut. I think the Angels are more playing for just who can they offload at the trade deadline, right? Maybe it's Tyler Anderson. Maybe Kyle Hendricks writes something. Maybe Yohan Moncada finds something now that he's back off the injured list. They still don't have Mike Trout. Look, I'm happy for the Angels in the sense that they needed it, right? Like, franchise-wise, they needed it. They needed it for relevance in the market. They need it for relevance in the division. They need it for some confidence. They need it for building blocks. They need it for Ron Washington's culture and program and all of that. But I don't think it ultimately means a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. I still think the Angels aren't that good. I still think they're going to finish last in the division. As for the Giants, now I am a bit surprised, right? Because I think the A's are very, very pesky, especially offensively. Like, you look up and down that lineup with Jacob Wilson and Brent Rooker and Lawrence Butler. Like, they have real offensive players, especially, spots 1 through 5 in the order, 1 through 6 in the order. Giants are good, right? Like, Giants are good. And Willie Adames hasn't really popped yet. He was their big offseason acquisition and haven't really gotten a ton offensively, at least average-wise, from Matt Chapman. And they just find a way, right? Robbie Ray is pitching well. Justin Verlander's pitching better, although he can't get wins. Bullpen looks better there as Camilo Duvall has kind of righted the ship from early season struggles. So I just think the Giants are a good team. Like, they were built to win. Last year was a disappointment and a letdown. And now they've got a full year of Jung-Hoo Lee. They're built to win, and they're winning.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I found sort of amazing and impressive, I was looking up some stats on the A's a couple days ago, and like, their bullpen ERA is among the worst in all of baseball, and that's with Mason Miller actually having a decent year. I mean, they've blown a lot of games late, but the Giants did a great job, and of course, now with the Dodgers losing 3 and the Giants winning 3, all of a sudden the Dodgers leading in the West, it's just 1 game over the Padres and 1 over the Giants. I mean, it's Padres wasted a golden opportunity this weekend, not doing much. But that's a 3-team race that's going to be good for a long, long time. And certainly we can't forget the Arizona Diamondbacks either, just 4 back. That NL West race is going to be really, really good all year. One of the other things I wanted to talk about in regards to teams that got swept, the Washington Nationals swept the Orioles, and over the weekend, Brandon Hyde was fired as the Orioles manager, which people have been sort of calling for his head, through this slow start all year. But we have talked on this podcast so much about the Orioles and how disappointing they've been, to us all year long. We always kept thinking that at some point they would start to play better baseball, but they just never have. They're 15-30 right now. And, for all those Orioles fans that lived through all those horrible years with this promise of a great rebuild, and then a couple of years of it being really good, but now here they are, 15-30, can't pitch, can't hit. And Brandon Hyde has to get shown the door because of it. I don't imagine, guys, that this surprised you in any way, right?
No, not really. I mean, I think at the start of the season, it was fair to sort of put a lot of the blame on the front office for not addressing the pitching staff that was not particularly good last year and really doing nothing to improve it. But, it's also been on the hitters like Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman are underperforming. And I think just as it drew on, at some point, some of the blame has to go to Brandon Hyde. Maybe not as much as the front office, but I think at some point this team is 15-30. It was a team that was projected. I think going into the season, their win total, line was 86.5. So it's a team that's far underperforming. And while you can point out that the front office didn't do enough to improve the pitching, at some point the underperforming just overall, it just gets too much. And and that's on the manager too.
Yeah, Brady, your thoughts?
I'm still blaming the front office and the player development system. Like, look, Brandon Hyde won 101 games just 2 years ago, and he won 95 games last year. And this year, they lose Corbin Burns. They let Anthony Santander go. And I know that Santander has not had a very good year in Toronto, but that's 43 home runs out of your lineup that you just let walk out the door. You go and let Corbin Burns walk out the door. And again, I wouldn't have paid Corbin Burns $220 million either. But when you don't bring about suitable replacements for guys, you're asking for what's happened right now. And as for player development, all this talk about the Orioles hitting prospects the last several years, where are the Orioles pitching prospects? Like, that's what I would like to know, right? Other teams have injuries and are able to overcome them at least to a certain level because they have guys that can fill in, right? I'm looking at the Mariners right now. Logan Evans and Emerson Hancock serving as depth options that are pitching, admirably for Kirby Lowe, Gilbert, and Bryce Miller. A couple of years ago, Mariners lose Marco Gonzalez and Robbie Ray, and boom, there's Brian Wu and Bryce Miller. Where are those guys for the Orioles? Okay, like, it's Grayson Rodriguez, and what else on the young pitching front? Because nothing, to be honest. Like, that's why you have 41-year-old Charlie Morton starting a bunch of games early in the year, because you don't have that next wave of pitchers.
Right, absolutely. And and I think just sort of the cards that were dealt to Brandon Hyde, through the years, he never really had anything in his back pocket that he could play, because obviously he was hired in the middle of a massive rebuild. I mean, the Orioles were very clear to everyone that they traded off every piece they had, and with the chance to bring a bunch of young prospects back and have high draft picks and kind of build a team with a nucleus that was built over 3 or 4 drafts. And, Brandon Hyde's first 3 years there, he was 122 games under 500 in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And that includes, playing a 60-game season in 2020. And so then when they finally get to the point where, all right, now the rebuild's starting to happen, and Rutschman's up, and Gunnar Henderson's up, and and all the next wave is coming. In 2022, they were 9 games under 500 on July 2nd, but then they went 48-35 at the end of the year, finished 83 wins, and everybody knew that this was a team that was on the come. And then in 23, they win 101 games, win the division for the first time, and everybody, in baseball crazy Baltimore, is excited about the fact that that there's going to be multiple World Series won by this group, and then they get swept in the playoffs, and then last year play well again, 91 wins, finish second to the Yankees by a handful of games, but then get in the playoffs and get swept again. So I think, Brandon Hyde, was on the hot seat for sure with 2 big playoff flameouts, but then certainly there was no getting over the fact, when you start 15-30, we can blame ownership all we want, we can blame the front office all we want too, but you can't, like the old adage goes, you can't trade 26 players, so the manager's got to take it. But now I'll be curious to see what they do from here. I mean, obviously, interim manager now for the rest of the year more than likely, but with this new ownership group in Baltimore, you'd think they need to make a splash somehow, some way. So it'd be real curious. I mean, it's I can't see them making the playoffs or making any sort of run or even getting better with what they have, like you said, Brady, with the pitching just being as much of a mess as it is. I can't see them doing it this year. But I'll be real curious to see how they go about replacing Brandon Hyde at the top of on the field and going from there for what should be in 2026. And I think what we might have to look at a little bit too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, guys, is like those big young stars that they brought up who are, I won't say underperforming, but they're not the all-stars that we thought they'd be. They're not the future Hall of Famers showing yet that we thought they'd be. I'm wondering, since they need pitching so bad, do you guys think at all that maybe they start to entertain trading away any of those names like Rutschman or Holiday or Gunnar Henderson? Do you think they would do any of that to get pitching because they need pitching so bad?
No, and they shouldn't do that either. What they should do is trade away the guys that they have now that aren't doing anything, right? Like if they can trade away Zach Eflin for a prospect, they should do it. If they can trade away Tomoyuki Shigano, who they signed this year, for a prospect, they should do it. If they can go and get rid of some of those guys create some level of prospect depth, and they should go spend money in the offseason. That's what they should do. They should go spend money. This is still a desirable job for a future manager because of all the young talent, and it's a desirable situation overall if the ownership group goes out and says, look, we'll go get you 2 or 3 guys that you need. Like, that should be the plan. It's not bottoming out. It's not reworking everything. It's trade off veteran guys you can now. Maybe Cedric Mullins, who's a free agent at the end of the year. Get some younger prospects there that might be able to help. It's a desirable situation still across the board.
So you think it's okay to go the prospect route and not major league ready guys?
Well, you're not trading Zach Eflin and his ERA of $1 million for somebody who's major league ready and a contributor who's solid. So if you can get a AAA depth guy or a AA lottery ticket for that, I would do it, right? But they need to build up the pitching farm system. You can go and sign major league pitching in the offseason. You got to develop some pitching too in-house, and I think that's where the prospects would come in.
Yeah, I think they certainly are going to need to do both, and they should have done that last winter. I mean, it's obviously that has to be the winter 2025 plan, but they totally dropped the ball, on what they were doing in 24. Agreed, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade Henderson, Rutschman, or Holiday, but I think where they kind of messed up was they had a bunch of other top 100 type of prospects like Jordan Westberg, Heston Kjerstad, Colton Cowser, the guy that they've brought up this year, Kobe Mayo. Like, I think where they might have messed up more is maybe not flipping one of those guys at the deadline last year or 2 years ago when they flamed out in the playoffs because they didn't have the pitching and still don't have the pitching. Maybe that could have brought a return of a starter or a reliever that would have made more impact, because I still wouldn't give up on the big three of Henderson, Rutschman, Holiday, but I think maybe they held on to the prospects a little bit too much when they should have sort of maybe being sort of a go for it mode the last couple of years in the playoffs, and just didn't have the pitching to do it.
Yep, absolutely. Brady, the Yankees and the Mets got together over the weekend, and it's kind of fun to see. Of course, Yankees fans love being Yankees fans. Their introduction to Juan Soto and a Mets jersey and all that stuff. What did you make of the Yankees-Mets series this weekend? You need to unmute.
This is not going to be a sexy takeaway, but the thing that sticks with me about the Yankees that's so impressive is just how good Luke Weaver is. Like, above all else, right? Like, we know Aaron Judge is awesome. He's the MVP. The Soto stuff we knew was going to be drama-filled. And there's Luke Weaver's got an ERA of, like, 0.5. Yeah. Like, that, to me, a guy who was a former top prospect, who kind of flamed out as a starter, off the scrap heap, multiple organizations. And now, I mean, he's taken over for a guy in Devin Williams they thought was going to be their closer. And you look at it, right? The Yankees lost Clay Holmes. They lost Tommy Kahnle. They lost Soto. They haven't had Stanton. They've lost Heel. They've lost Cole. They've lost a lot. And I know we just kind of think that they're, fast-tracked to deep in the playoffs, but you still got to go out and play the games. And Luke Weaver has been a huge revelation for them last year and this year. It really solidifies things for Aaron Boone at the back end of the bullpen. And it's been very, very impressive to see him. We saw him throw 3 scoreless innings against the Mariners last week as well in Seattle. And look, Paul Goldschmidt's been good. Cody Bellinger is hot. Judge is Judge. Luke Weaver is a guy that kind of sticks out to me under the radar.
Yep, absolutely. And I think too, we can't leave out as part of that Yankees conversation is Max Fried. He's made 10 starts. The Yankees have won 9 of the 10 games he started. He's 6-0 himself. He started the game against the Mariners last week that they lost. That's been it. He's been really good. And you're right about Luke Weaver. I mean, 20 and a third innings, I think it is, with 1 earned run, 0-44. And even that was a check swing hit that was as part of that where the 1 run scored. I agree. He's kind of saved them, a bunch, when you can, because you guys both know from being around baseball so long, when you have a closer who can no longer close, and a lot of teams have never had that next guy who could step into that role and be successful. And there's been a lot of teams that just, your bullpen flame out starts with your closer and it just carries on. But for the Yankees, Luke Weaver's a godsend because he's just if they were forced to trot Devin Williams out there every day now to close games, it would have been a major problem. And kudos to Aaron Boone for making a point of not being too arrogant or too stubborn with Williams to leave him in that role. He seems a little bit more comfortable in pitching the 8th inning now, but still, I think Luke Weaver is their closer certainly for this year and going forward as well. So, Jack, I wanted to kind of talk about one of the teams in the National League Central this week that played really well over the weekend too, the Cincinnati Reds. Swept the Guardians, who I like, and it was 3 big wins for the Reds. They are playing, they're a team that's been, for me, really hard to sort of figure out this year as to how good they are, because they get on a nice little run for a while and look pretty good, and then they kind of stumble a little bit, and they have not been very good at home. I mean, for a team that usually plays well in that ballpark, they're just 13-12 at home, and run differential over 30, but still just a 500 ball club at 24-24. But what do you think of this? Of how the Reds played this weekend, and where they maybe go from here?
Yeah, well, it was huge for them to do what they did this weekend, because I was just in Cincinnati last week and watched them lose 2 or 3 games to the White Sox, and after that series, I kind of walked away from that really down on the Reds. I didn't think their lineup looked very dangerous outside of Elly De La Cruz, who, he was incredible that series. But just overall, it sort of felt like the White Sox were able to just be like, all right, we'll attack the rest of the lineup and then just try to be a little bit careful with Elly. I didn't think their starting pitching was very impressive against the White Sox. So I kind of walked away, really down on the Reds, and maybe even more optimistic about the Cardinals and the Brewers' ability to catch the Cubs in that division. But, like you said, they've been sort of hard to figure out, because then all of a sudden this weekend they go and sweep a good Guardians team. I think it's been really big for them. Will Benson has gotten hot there in center field. They need guys like Spencer Steer and Matt McClain to start hitting a little bit more. I still don't really buy this team in terms of like being a playoff contender. With how competitive the NL is, I just don't think there's enough spots. But things could have gotten bad after losing a series to the White Sox. So credit them for bouncing back and getting a big sweep this weekend.
Yep, absolutely. It's like I said, hard team to figure out. They just looked really good for a while, and then they don't. And obviously, let's talk real quick too about the Cardinals in that division, because they had the long double-digit win streak finally ended, but the Minnesota Twins got to 13 games and finally ended. And neither one of those teams, they were both kind of awful in April, but they've gotten really hot now. So, Jack, let's just kind of touch real quick on the Cardinals and what they've done. And do you think what they're doing is sustainable? And then we'll jump in and ask you the same question about the Twins.
Yeah, I think if I were to pick a team that I think is the biggest threat to catch the Cubs, I would say the Cardinals. I know that's not something crazy to say. They're 2 games back and they're ahead of the Reds and Brewers. I just think the starting pitching, I give them a nod over the Reds. I think the lineup up and down is much deeper. Like Brendan Donovan's having a great season. Wilson Contreras and Arenado aren't who they've been in the past, but still productive players. They probably have the best closer in the division. I think it was safe to say too, with Ryan Helsley. So I would give the Cardinals, I think, the best chance to catch the Cubs. Will they? I'm not totally sure, but I have more confidence in them in terms of like up and down the roster. I don't think their holes are as big as maybe the Brewers or the Reds.
Yeah, and Brady, the Twins winning 13 games in a row, from being around baseball forever, that I don't care who you are, winning 13 games in a row, regardless of the opponents, is pretty darn impressive, isn't it?
Twins, look, I had them as my most disappointing team in baseball just last week, and that was when they had won still like 4 or 5 in a row. So you talk about a 180 here. Twins are, I'm not ready to say that they're good, but they have some very good pieces. So it's understandable how a team like this can get hot, right? Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton, Royce Lewis. Not everybody's healthy. Correa's now on the concussion injured list. Buxton was injured in that collision as well. But I really like Joe Ryan. I really like Pablo Lopez. And I really like the back end of the bullpen with Griffin Jacks and Stewart and Duran. So, jury's out for years on football daily, and we'll see what the Twins do the rest of the way. But they do have some very interesting pieces that I like. So it doesn't surprise me they got hot, but 13 in a row, that surprises everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just a lot right there. For a team like that, who's especially when they started as slow as they did, to get hot like that. Like you said, I love that bullpen, and what they've been doing lately has been really good. When you get hot like that, all of a sudden, they were 7-15 to start the season, and now here they are. They finally lost Sunday to the Brewers, 5-2, but they had 3 shutouts in a row. They won, beat the Orioles on Thursday 4-0, and then beat the Brewers 3-0, 7-0. They had 3 one-run games in the start of that series, 2 against the Giants, 1 against the Orioles. They're just really getting good pitching and getting timely hitting. And when you've got a bullpen like that, to win close games, it works out pretty well. So, all right, let's let me ask you guys some questions and give me some answers, however long or short you want. The Yankees and the Tigers both have 5-game leads in the AL East and AL Central, respectively. Does anybody catch either of those 2 teams in that division, those 2 divisions?
I would probably
go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I would probably say the Tigers are more likely to get caught, I think, because I think there's more teams. I could see the Twins with their pitching. Like I picked the Twins preseason to win the division because of that pitching staff that's really come on lately. I think the Guardians and Royals are both solid teams up and down the roster. So I think it's less that I have concerns about the Tigers and more that I like the teams behind them than those teams in the AL East.
Yeah, Brady, what do you think?
Tend to agree with Jack. I like the Royals, although the injuries to Lugo and Reagans are big deals to monitor moving forward here over the next couple of weeks. I will say neither team gets caught, but I agree the Tigers are more likely to be caught.
Yep. And then AL West, Mariners have a 2.5-game lead, so it's not really fair to ask the same question since the AL West is still pretty close. But let me just phrase it to you this way, Brady. And here on May 19th, do you feel like from what you've seen from everybody so far, 7 weeks into the season, that the Mariners are the best team in that division right now?
I think the Mariners are the best team in that division. I picked them to win the division. Look, I think they're going to win 87, 88 games. I don't think they're going to win 93 games. I think we saw them have a 1-5 homestand last week. I think they're likely to have a 5 out of 6 game stretch just like that again at some point relatively soon also. I think the whole division is just kind of full of good runs, but full of also holes as well. The thing the Mariners have working for them, George Kirby's back. He may even start as early as Thursday against the Astros. Bryce Miller's expected to be back off the injured list on May 27th, and Logan Gilbert, knock on wood, isn't too far behind him. So the Mariners rotation, which is supposed to be the best part of this roster, is getting healthier finally, and that's going to go a long way. And I think that can help solidify them over the final 100 games or so.
Yep, absolutely. And I think part of that AL West too is as much of like. We've seen good things out of the Astros and the Rangers at times, but we've seen a lot of, stretches where both of those teams just can't hit at all, and I think it's been, I agree with you that the Mariners are the best team. I wonder if either the Astros or the Rangers will finally get hot at the plate and just, and have a long run, because they're getting pretty good pitching, both of them. If they can have a long run where they go, 11-4 or something like that over a couple of weeks period, I just don't see that right now. The Astros, to me, just lost way too many pieces, and I don't like that offense at all. The other night I watched Jacob deGrom and Hunter Brown pitch, a 1-0 game that I think I shared the stat with both you guys. It was the first time an Astros Rangers game had gone into the 8th inning with both starters still pitching since 2021, like 4 years. Like that just doesn't happen. But I watched that entire game and neither team threatened to score. I mean, it just they got we got a home run to win at 1-0, and that was it. And so I don't think. Like I said, I don't believe the Mariners are a juggernaut by any means, but I think they're the best team in there, and especially like you say, getting Kirby back, I think it will be good. I think we like that rotation already, and as you mentioned earlier in the show, they've been getting some good help. The guys that come in and fill some spots, and but there are more 1 in 5 weeks in the Mariners' future. And just the question is, how many of them are there going to be? So I think that's good. And then obviously we don't even need to bother having that conversation with National League teams because every one of those races is going to be they're super tight now and they're going to stay that way. But the Mets and the Phillies, just a half a game separates them right now. Like we mentioned, the Cubs are just 2 up on the Cardinals, and then the National League West, Dodgers just 1 up on the Padres and Giants. It's just going to be a great race all year. So it's going to be good and a lot of fun. And all right, so let's kind of wrap up the show. Obviously, you guys are together this week for Mariners White Sox, but there's plenty of other good series going on this week as well too. Is there anything in particular that's jumping out that you're looking forward to watching this week?
Yeah, I'm interested to see. I think it's interesting with the Cubs going down to Miami this weekend. Matt Shaw is getting called back up from AAA, and he got really hot there over the last couple weeks. The Cubs might also get Ian Happ back from the injured list this week. So I think for the start that they've gotten off to get 2 upgrades back in their lineup. I mean, I'm interested to see just from that perspective, how hot can they get on this run, because they weathered the storm of a tough schedule early in the season, and now it gets much easier. So, can they start to distance themselves from the Cardinals and some of those other teams in the division?
Yeah. Red Sox. Just want to see if the Red Sox can get going. Team I thought was going to go to the World Series. They're 2 games under 500 entering play on Monday. We take it on the Mets at Fenway. First place team comes to town again. Red Sox just lost the series against the Braves, who have played much better, obviously. But look, Red Sox nearly 50 games in, under 500. And, I mean, they've been relatively healthy. Like, I can't pin this on injuries either. I mean, yes, they lost Casas, and I think that is big. And they've got, Buehler's on the injured list right now. But by and large, the guys you thought would be guys for them have been there. Devers has been great, and Bregman's have been great. And they still can't win. And so I can't quite figure out where they're at and why right now. But they're 2 games under 500. It's got a chance to snowball worse than that against a good Mets team coming in.
Absolutely. For me, really looking forward to early in the week here, Cardinals-Tigers series. Take us all the way back to 1968 for us old-timers. But, those are 2 teams that we've been really impressed with, obviously, all year long. I mean, Tigers, best record in baseball, and Cardinals, long winning streak, playing really good ball. And it'll be, it's a good interleague matchup there that I'm really looking forward to see. I think that will be a lot of fun. Good pitching matchups every night too, and it should be a blast. That's for me is a good series to keep an eye on. And then Cardinals, they get the Diamondbacks at home this weekend. They got to pay attention to that too. And then we got Mariners Astros in Houston this weekend, and then looking forward to Dodgers Mets this weekend too. And obviously, when it's the Dodgers and the Mets, I think they're on national TV in all 3 of those games. So we'll see a bunch of that. So it should be a good week of baseball. And I'm glad to have the 2 of you guys together in person this week. So enjoy all that together. And then we'll be back next week for Payoff Pitch Podcast number 9 as we near the end of May already, 2 months into the season. It's hard to believe how fast it's flying by. So guys, enjoy your time together in Chicago, and hopefully you'll see some good baseball and eat some good food and have a good time.
Yep, for sure.
All right, guys. Thanks.
All right. Have a great trip, and we'll talk to you guys next week on the Playoff Pitch Podcast, volume number 9 next week. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.